So Avi presented this at WIPIT, and I came up for Q&A, so I'm going to put you through that at this one, because we got beat up pretty badly at WIPIT, so I figured I'd give it another go. Here, we actually revised the paper a bit based on some excellent comments we had at WIPIT, including our initial example. So here's the scenario. You have a Duke Blue Devils fan, we'll leave the mascot out of it, watching a basketball in his basement, dressed in Duke gear, drinking from a Blue Devil mug, on a Blue Devil couch, in his Blue Devil slippers, or just doing a little work in his Blue Devils office chair. So the question is, what role does and should trademark law play in this sort of scenario? So if we look at the traditional explanations for trademark law on a search cost theory, it doesn't make much sense here because the underlying products, the functional products, aren't particularly important to this Duke Blue Devils fan. It's the brand, the mark, the trade dress, and so forth that are the important items. Now there are some theories that reach towards what we think is a description of this, but don't quite get there. So we'll start with the expressive value theories. So Rochelle Dreyfus, Barton Beebe, and so forth recognize that trademarks can serve as tools of expression. So the mark, in a sense, is like a word. So let's take the Mets logo. It's a word expressing some sort of meaning to others. So by wearing a shirt, you're telling others, hey, I'm a Mets fan. So brands are self-expressive private goods, but at the same time, they're linguistic public goods like any word. And to the extent we take that out of circulation with trademark law, that presents potential problems with respect to the types of symbols we can use in society. And this view generally counsels in favor of weaker protection to foster self-expression. She coined the term expressive genericity. There are also some status-based theories that relate to expression as well, but focus in on the status aspects of communicating particular traits about the consumer to others. So Landis and Posner, Chef on Veblen goods, and so forth. Here, we're mostly looking at snob goods or status goods that show that you have wealth or some other desirable characteristic to third parties. Barton Beebe has a paper discussing how trademark law functions as a sort of sumptuary code. Why? Because it excludes others from accessing these marks and communicating to others that they have certain traits in a given society, which segments that society in certain ways. The closest theory to what I'll present as an explanation for this Duke Blue Devil scenario is Devin Desai's brand theory. So Devin has a great quote in a 2012 paper: consumers often buy branded goods not for their quality, but as badges of loyalty, ways to express identity, and items to alter and interpret for self-expression. So what we're really focused on here in this paper is the badge of loyalty, or the membership aspect of brand theory, which Devin discusses somewhat in his paper, but he doesn't fully disentangle from these other important aspects of brand theory, and he doesn't offer an economic theory like we do of how this might work in the trademark context. There are a number of other papers that touch upon this, but we feel don't quite hit at the heart of what our theory is. And what's that? That one function, but not the only function, of course, is creating clubs and signifying membership. It's not simply about self-expression to others, but it's about you being connected through a brand, specifically a mark, to other who? Consumers, promoters of the goods and services, even the companies and the product's persona that's directed out towards consumers, again, via uses of branded products and services. What's key here is the brand image and personality is dependent on the network of users. And this is where trademark law comes in, as we'll see in a minute. How is this different from expressive theories? I mentioned it briefly, but the key is here we're focusing on private psychological value. So if you think about the Blue Devils fan in the basement, it's not about showing others that I'm a fan. Yes, you may do that if you're at the game, but there's a separate aspect to wearing that shirt, using that gear, which is membership, loyalty. I'm part of a club.
I'm getting internal psychological value from this. And if you look at the psychological and marketing literature, and here I draw off of Devin's paper to a certain extent, there are a number of studies on this. These are just some examples. And it's somewhat reminiscent of Peggy Reagan's Property and Personhood, but in the IP context. We also provide what we think is a fairly robust law and economics explanation of self-expression, as well as this membership aspect of branding. Most people have viewed these sorts of aspects of trademark as outside of the traditional economic framework, which it is, because that focuses on public goods and information costs. What we bring in here are club goods, which are a variant of public goods. So they're intermediate between public and private goods. Unlike a public good, they're actually excludable. But what does the exclusion here in this context? It's the trademark. And they're non-rivalrous like a public good, but only up to a point of congestion. At the point of congestion, they become rivalrous. So you can think about a highway. So a highway with some sort of toll booth is excludable. And when there aren't many cars on it, it's basically non-rivalrous, but as too many cars use the road, it gets congested, and that's where the exclusion plays its role. We'll see in a second how trademarks do that in the context of clubs and membership. I'm going to skip some of this stuff just to speed up and get to Q&A. So we argue that club goods value is pervasive. It's not just about I said mascots, but team loyalty in sports and that sort of thing. It's, of course, riding a Harley Davidson, but driving a Prius too. It tells you about the person. These are the types of activities and brands we incorporate into our own psychology, and others can view us through that lens. Using an iPhone versus other phones, drinking a Coke versus a Pepsi, craft beer versus mass-produced beer, even what grocery store you shop at. Commercials for all these brands, of course, set up this network. So Coca-Cola, I'd like to teach the world to sing, and we had this in here before the last Mad Men episode, if you saw that. But that's about bonding, connection, membership, and so forth. By drinking the Coke, I'm part of this world crowd. I'm a Windows versus a Mac person. And you can think of many other ad campaigns and commercials that brand a persona essentially with respect to the mark that you incorporate into yourself when you use it, and tie yourself to networks of others who are part of those branding campaigns, as well as all the people you see out there using a specific type of brand or mark. Now, where does the exclusion come in? This is through trademark law. This is the fence that we allow the club owner to draw around the mark, and why is it important? So one, what does trademark law do in this context? It allows for super competitive pricing for the underlying good. So if we didn't have any sort of trademark law, then copyists could come in and put the Duke Blue Devils logo on any sort of product and price that at what? The cost of the functional product. Well, what does that do? It allows any consumer now to join the club of Duke Blue Devils fans, which makes the club less valuable to the fans. So trademark law essentially allows the owners to price over that cost, the competitive cost, and exclude out at least those consumers who merely seek the underlying functional good. At the same time, particularly for luxury goods, if you set the price really high, of course, you can price out as many people as you want. You can set it at an infinite value, of course, but where you set that price will keep that group exclusive and effectively select the consumer network, thereby reducing brand congestion. Now, I'll get to whether or not this is a socially valuable use of trademark in a second, but this is the economic mechanism by which it works on the pricing side. It also allows the owner to police brand uses. So to the extent that the mark is manipulated, misused, diluted / tarnished, right, in trademark law by a third party, the brand owner can foreclose that and maintain the integrity of the mark and the associated club by doing so. So we have a policing of the brand. In that sense, although you could buy, anyone can buy these goods as a technical matter, this policing through pricing and other sorts of exclusionary mechanisms, as a practical matter, will mean that the branded good is not widely available. Now, of course, these clubs are going to be imperfect, and some people may buy in who the producer doesn't want to buy in, or other users, but on balance, it helps promote, in our view, the integrity and the unique status of the particular club at issue. This is more of a free-riding goodwill misappropriation approach to trademark law, which you've seen in many court cases and in literature, and we think that club goods helps to explain this as well as link trademark to other areas of IP law like copyright and patent. In the doctrinal area, this club goods rationale helps support dilution, post-sale confusion, sponsorship affiliation, all sorts of doctrines that on a search cost rationale and even other proposed rationales don't do so well. Now, it's not an all-encompassing theory. There are obviously other important interests in trademark law. This theory can exist alongside the search cost theory. It can exist alongside the self-expression and explain some of it, because part of self-expression stems from membership. We can bring in other interests to restrict how strongly we apply a club goods rationale, competition, and free speech, and so forth. But we still think it's an important factor in the mix that needs to be taken into account. And with that, I've left 10 minutes for questions.
So a couple of thoughts. So there's this literature about social capital that pretty much does a lot of the same stuff. So you can think about, so if you're to say, what is the resource that is what you're calling a club good? Right, it's not the trademark. I think a couple times you mentioned the network, or the network of relationships,
right.
The network the users are on. Well, another way to frame it, it's a social good. There's a whole bit Musgrave, there's a whole bunch of economics literature on social goods, and social capital being one of a few different types. Merit goods, and there's a couple, but they all sort of fit. So I think I think you could explain everything you're saying would fit just as well if you framed it in terms of social capital being the resource that trademarks create. Sometimes it's true that the networks are congestible, social networks, these kinds of networks. Sometimes they're not. It's not clear to me. It's one thing for luxury goods that they become congestible, and thus you have, they can be excluded. The excludability, you want to exploit it to manage membership size. But there's also more the merrier clubs, in which case it's not clear that you run into the congestion problem that you're highlighting. In which case it's not a club good theory problem; it's a pure social capital problem. So I think there's other economic theories that may fit the underlying resource a little bit closer than club goods, except club goods sometimes fits. Does that make sense?
Sure. So we got this question from Lynn Lunny with it. So we think most of the time there will be congestion problems, but to the extent you think there aren't, and certainly there aren't, he suggested this TiVo model, where essentially you have competing local public goods. So different brands may want everyone in the world. Coke would say, yeah, we want everyone to be a Coke drinker. And Pepsi would say, we want everyone to be a Coke drinker. So then you have these TiVo public goods where it's sort of like two localities competing with one another for members.
So notice, congestion is not what the producer wants necessarily. Congestion is when what are the impact of a consumer joining the network on the rest of the other people on the network, right?
Correct, but the producer's gonna, internalize that through price and profit. But go ahead.
I have to look at this again. It's been a while since I've read Musgrave, but we're not talking about, I don't think that we're talking about, we're not talking about social capital, at least as I remember it, or what do you call them again, Musgrave?
Well, he had merit goods.
Merit
There's
goods,
a whole
merit goods, right.
Social.
I don't think that that's what we're talking about. The way that I like to think of this, and if you want to, you can think of this in terms of club goods or something else, but simply think that the element that we're interested in here is the total part of it. rather than the congestion part of it. Right? This is the way that whatever may be the good that the producer is trying to convey, let's call it the road here, right? Trademark is giving the ability to exclude with the total. Now this may be because there's a congestion problem, or it may be because of whatever other problem there is. But the mark is simply the fence, if you will, by which it's we're excluding users of certain kinds, and thereby policing the quality and the usability of the good. Right? We can be fairly agnostic, I think, about what type of good it actually is.
Just that it's, so the point, if I'm understanding, so the point is that trademarks enable people to exclude others, so it's a means for exclusion. That's
in economically valuable ways. I think most of the time you'll be dealing with a club good, but there may be situations where you're dealing with other types of goods to the extent congestion is not
all
important.
the trademark, I mean, I'm not a trademark side, but don't all the trademark people recognize that trademarks are a means for excluding people?
Not with respect to, we're not talking about search costs though, we're talking about with respect to the use of the value of the mark and brand itself. So it's pretty different.
Yeah, this is not.
We don't care about the underlying product.
Competing producers. This is a means of excluding, in fact, consumers. Which, if you look at the expressive goods theories, that this is not a feature. It's a bug, right? And that's a problem. We're actually showing why this may, in fact, be a feature.
Definitely.
So, one thing that's a little confusing, maybe, is it seems like the thing that might jump out at first with clubs would be the more luxury stuff. But you're saying no, big brands can do this.
We differ a little bit in how much it applies, but I think most of the most valuable brands derive a huge percentage of their value from the membership club aspect.
Right, and so in terms of, I didn't get deeper because I was doing a broader thing, but that makes sense. It fits with all the other literature that I've seen in there. But then the follow-up questions are, you're saying, and it's good to allow, in your example to begin with, Duke to control that. So I don't know, I haven't had a chance to read the draft yet, or if you've sent it to me, apologies. But the questions would be, why Duke? I assume the issue is, do you think they're better placed? And so the counter questions might be some of the other marketing literature that I pointed to about the co-creation of value idea. So the idea that, is that necessarily good, or are you going with, well, roughly they're better placed to design the club and thus should be allowed to do that? And it also reminds me in competition, last little idea, of somehow resale price maintenance kind of pops to my brain, which is I think what you're trying to get at a little, which is as a more generalized system, you're saying, yeah, it's cool that you can build this network, but we think that the mark holder should be able to really control, to a certain extent, that, and they're going to extract rent, and that's cool, that's actually part of the game, and that's all fine. And we should acknowledge that that's how that works, and then talk about what limits there should be. Is that roughly where you guys are?
So a mark holder can decide at the end of the day that, you give the example of Harley Davidson in your article, that it's better to have the consumers and users essentially control a lot of aspects of brand maintenance and development and so forth.
Right.
But in our view, that needs to come from some central authority to the extent you're concerned about the maintenance of these clubs. Because you can't maintain the integrity without some level of exclusion. That can be delegated, of course, but to the extent you're concerned about this interest. Now, there are other interests in trademark law that we mentioned at the end of the paper, but to the extent you're concerned about this interest, yes, you'd want the control and you'd want the ability to price over the competitive cost and all that good stuff. Jonathan?
So I think it's a really interesting project. I guess, I guess my question is, supposing I buy the framework completely, and I think it's a really sort of smart framework, and let's suppose I buy all of your strongest assumptions that these clubs decrease in value for their members as the membership grows uncontrollably, contra Brett, saying maybe there are some clubs where the more people involved, the better off it is. I still don't know how we get to the same welfare conclusions. Because each additional person you let in, that person gets some welfare from being in the club, and maybe everyone else in the club loses a little bit of welfare. So how do we know which is greater? I mean, maybe we're going to maximize welfare by letting everyone in, even if that diminishes the extra welfare gain that all the original people are acquiring.
So the producer will have the right economic incentives to make that decision.
Why do we know that?
In those situations, because they charge for these goods. So as right, the number of people increase, presumably the cost for the good would go down if the actual benefit the users are getting goes down, and their profit at some point would be less, even though you have more users. Yeah, so it's similar, right? Monopoly pricing. There'd be some point at which the producer surplus decreases, and that would be, it's not going to be perfect, but it would be a decent signal for social surplus as well.
But I don't think that that's right, because by definition, if you allow other people in, you're breaking up the monopoly. So of course the producer will lose.
But the value of the good goes down. That's the definition of a club good. So if you think of like a tennis club or a social club, if you allow everyone in, no one wants to be in. So at an infinite number of users, it's zero. So the idea is there's some point at which you pass, at which the value of the good goes down more than the increase in the number of users, and now you're past the optimal level. But yeah, that's an empirical claim about certain goods, and this has been in the literature for 50 years, and there's lots of studies on it and so forth that we haven't gone over, but we'll cite those in the paper. Okay.
I'm a confused Blue Devil fan. Are you saying that Duke University has an interest in limiting the number of Blue Devil fans that are out there?
They have an interest in twofold. One, making sure that people who aren't true Blue Devil fans are wearing the gear because they want to maintain the integrity of that brand. And two, they want to make sure that competitors aren't using the brand in a way that would tarnish or dilute or somehow blur, using trademark language, the integrity of that brand. I think they're more concerned with the second probably than the first, but one could imagine situations with the first where there's certain types of people who don't really care about the Blue Devils who all of a sudden, right, are wearing those shirts. If they wanted everyone to wear it, you could go online and you'd see the price of the shirt should be, right, $1 or whatever the marginal cost is for Duke to produce it.
To me, that's just about selling more shirts.
I'll just add something. If all the world were Blue Devils fans, there would be no Blue Devils fans, because the value of it requires it to be in competition with various others. Now, it may be true that in a lot of contexts they'll never run up against this problem, right? They'll sell all the shirts that they can on campus and never have to worry about limiting. But at some point, yes, there is a point where they don't want there to be too many fans. At that point, they're no longer able to sell this as an identity in competitive sports.
All right.